So as said, let us start with understanding what ASP .NET Core is in some more detail. And let us start with a bit of a definition here. ASP .NET Core is an open source web framework created by Microsoft and the community for building modern web applications and services with .NET. This definition already contains several key aspects of the what and why of ASP .NET Core. It is an open source web framework. Indeed, it's open source. So Microsoft creates and maintains the ASP .NET Core framework entirely on GitHub. And everyone, so the community, is able to suggest and make changes. That doesn't take away that Microsoft is offering full support on the framework. So no worries there. And secondly, indeed, as we already said in the introduction, it's a framework that allows us to build modern web applications and services with .NET. As we will learn soon, ASP .NET Core is a modular framework and it exists out of many libraries that we can select to be included in our application to, let's say, enable certain features in the application. Let's dive a little deeper in what exactly we can build with ASP .NET Core. Being a web framework, we can build pretty much every type of web application with it. I tend to group these in three categories: server-side rendered applications, services, and client-side rendered applications. The first group is server-side rendered applications. These were the original target for ASP .NET Core and its predecessor, ASP.NET. In server-side rendered applications, the dynamic content that we want to show the user is rendered, as the name gives away, on the server and is then sent to the client. This way, we create dynamically generated pages for a web store, a blog, or even full large-scale enterprise web applications. The second group I mentioned is services. And I say services since using ASP .NET Core, we can create a variety of web services that can be consumed by other applications or frontends. Say you are building a mobile application that needs to display an up-to-date list of products with their stock. Rendering HTML in that case won't make sense. The mobile application is just interested in data that it wants to display. And to cater for this, we can create a service, an API with ASP .NET Core. Most often, we will create an ASP .NET Core REST API, which will return JSON to the client, so the mobile application. If you're building a React or Angular front-end web application, that too could connect with this API. Alternatively, ASP .NET Core can be used to create a gRPC service. Using ASP .NET Core, we can create also what is often referred to as microservices, a set of services that together compose the backend functionality. Finally, the most recent addition to the types of applications we can build with ASP .NET Core is client-side rendered applications. Traditionally, client-side applications, so applications that have a lot of functionality available in the browser, offering a rich user experience, are written using JavaScript. Now, it's also possible to write these using ASP .NET Core entirely. Typically, these applications will be downloaded to the client and run from there. Extra data they might need will be requested when needed and is typically returned as JSON. Microsoft has created ASP .NET Core with a few clear goals in mind. Traditionally, ASP.NET and .NET, the predecessors of ASP .NET Core and .NET Core respectively, were tied closely to Windows. Now the world has changed a lot since these technologies were introduced, way back in the early 2000s, and Microsoft has seen a shift to different platforms in the industry. Therefore, ASP.NET Core and the underlying .NET 6 are cross-platform, meaning that you can build and run your ASP.NET Core applications on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Linux being supported is actually a big deal. In the hosting space, a lot of servers are running Linux, not Windows, so our ASP.NET Core code can easily run on these without any change. Yes, you heard that correctly. The exact same application code that you write for your ASP.NET Core application runs on each platform without needing to make a change. How great is that? And yes, Windows, Mac, and Linux are all supported to build your applications, to build your ASP.NET Core applications too. As we already mentioned, ASP.NET Core is fully open source. Microsoft develops .NET 6 and ASP.NET Core 6 fully out in the open. All code is available on GitHub, That's where all the action happens. You can easily see what they're doing for the next version. You can browse the code of the ASP.NET Core framework, and you can fix bugs or suggest changes that will be reviewed by Microsoft. Imagine after watching this course that you can look at the source code of the framework and suggest changes to Microsoft. How cool is that? Compared to pre.NET Core versions of .NET, Microsoft has applied a much faster development cycle. Now, each year we will see a version increase with minor breaking changes but many new features to take advantage of. Finally, and I even mentioned this already briefly, ASP.NET Core is very modular. It is in fact a collection of a large set of NuGet packages, and we as developers can choose what we need and want to include in our application. You are in charge, adding only those modules that are needed. This too is a big change compared to previous versions, where if you needed to create an ASP.NET application, you got pretty much the entire framework in your application. Being modular decreases the memory footprint of your application, and thus the performance is much better using ASP.NET Core. And the used memory, well, that's a lot lower. Now that is also good news if you're interested in building microservices using ASP.NET Core. Microservices, as the name implies, are smaller services that expose a single functionality. Building and hosting these services requires a platform that is highly scalable, and that is another area where ASP.NET Core shines. Now that we already know a bit what ASP.NET Core is and why it was created, let's start exploring the architecture. And a bit of a warning here, you will hear possibly quite a few things which don't make sense at all yet. Don't worry, as we will learn about all the features explained here, well, later in this course. So, the architecture of ASP.NET Core, let's say in a helicopter view. When we talk about ASP.NET Core, we talk about a few things combined in fact. Let me explain. ASP.NET Core, so the framework, is composed out of the ASP.NET Core framework as well as a few other frameworks. The core ASP.NET Core platform contains the more, low-level features. These include the code that will receive the requests and create the response, but also middleware and the integrated Kestrel server are part of this. Also, the logic for model binding, the Razor engine, and quite a few other building blocks such as logging are part of this shared platform. Again, if most or all of these terms mean nothing to you at this point, no worries, you will learn about them soon. However, I did say one important thing: shared platform. Indeed, on top of this core shared platform, there are several what I like to refer to as application frameworks. These are ASP.NET Core MVC, Razor Pages, and Blazor. Most of the code that we will write will in fact use these frameworks rather than the ASP.NET Core platform, but still, you can't use ASP.NET Core MVC without the ASP.NET Core platform. MVC, Razor Pages, and Blazor are thus three frameworks that we will use to build our applications with. We will in this course focus first on ASP.NET Core MVC, which is the framework used most often to build server-side rendered applications using ASP.NET Core. You'll also see how to use Razor Pages as well as Blazor, as they are all based on the same foundation. It is very well possible to have them all used together in the same application. And that's exactly what we will do in this course. Finally, there are a few other frameworks that are also important when building real ASP.NET Core applications. Entity Framework is the framework to interact with databases. We'll see how to use this in this course. Secondly, the ASP.NET Core Identity Framework is used to perform authentication so that the users log into our application. We'll see that later in this course as well. You'll often hear or read about the different ASP.NET Core application frameworks, so that is why I want to highlight them here again. We'll start in this course with ASP.NET Core MVC, and we'll use that, for most of the application that we'll build. MVC stands for Model View Controller, and that's in fact a design pattern that is much older than ASP.NET Core itself. MVC focuses on the separation of concerns. We'll see that when we build our pages using this pattern. We'll see how we can split our logic between the model, the controller, and the view, which is key to this way of working. And as we'll also see, ASP.NET Core APIs are also built using this approach. Razor pages are, let's say, a newer framework, and they were introduced to go around the complexity that is sometimes involved for setting up an MVC-based approach. Just like MVC, Razor pages are rendered server-side, so the code runs on the server and the HTML response is sent to the client. Razor pages are, as said, simpler to create and are often used for more simple applications, whereas MVC is used for more mature, larger applications. That is the very reason I will focus on MVC in this course too, but we will include Razor pages as well. One important thing, there's not much to be concerned about should you need to change between the different frameworks. Most concepts are identical, as you'll see. So when you know one, while moving to the other one is very simple. Yet another great advantage of ASP.NET Core. Finally, the third application framework was Blazor. Using Blazor, we can create client-side code. Instead of using JavaScript that runs directly on the client, using Blazor, we can use C# to create interactive web applications. Again, good news. It is ASP.NET Core, so most concepts are the same, but now on the client. We'll see how we can embed the Blazor component in our ASP.NET Core app. I want to conclude this part with a short overview of versions and history, so to avoid any confusion around versions and names. Now, this can be a complicated story at times, so I want to make sure you're at least partly on board with how things have come to be the way they are now. So, a short history lesson. Way back in the early 2000s, .NET was introduced, the .NET framework, and ASP.NET was part of this too. ASP.NET had a technology to build web pages called ASP.NET Web Forms. While it was a great technology to quickly build pages, the resulting HTML wasn't always very clean. With that in mind, Microsoft created ASP.NET MVC, a second framework to build web applications with. ASP.NET MVC quickly evolved, and over the years, several updates were released. But then Microsoft decided to take the open source cross-platform route, and that wasn't possible to do on the current stack, so on .NET, since .NET itself was tied too closely to Windows. And so ASP.NET Core 1.0 was introduced in 2016, followed quickly by ASP.NET Core 1.1. Both versions are based on the core version of .NET, called .NET Core. With the introduction of .NET Core, updates started coming at a much higher speed. In 2017 and 2018, we got ASP.NET Core 2, 2.1 and 2.2, and 2019 saw the release of 3.0 and 3.1 based on .NET Core 3.0 and .NET Core 3.1. I'm saying that because that's about to change. Microsoft has started a unification between the different .NETs. So plain .NET and .NET Core, and this became reality with the release of .NET 5 in 2020. At that time, ASP.NET Core 5 was also released. Late 2021, we got .NET 6 and ASP.NET Core 6, and that's the version this course is based on. Note that we do not say .NET Core anymore. We now say .NET 6. But for ASP.NET Core 6, we still include the core part in the name. So whenever I'm referring to ASP.NET Core in this course, I'm referring to ASP.NET Core 6, the version used in this course. All these new versions can be, well, slightly confusing. Rest assured, sometimes my head starts spinning too. It's now a bit of a challenge to keep up. Going forward, there will be a yearly update cycle. However, Microsoft is using a system where some versions are getting support for a longer time. .NET 6 and ASP.NET Core 6 are known as LTS versions, or full long-term support versions, meaning that they will continue to get updates for 3 years. That'll be the same for .NET 8, so all even version numbers. Odd version numbers, 5, 7 and so on, will be known as current releases, and they only get support for another 6 months after the next version is released.